Tonight we begin with a question that sounds simple enough on the surface. What if you could visit the deep sea? Not in a submarine, not with a cozy titanium hull between you and the abyss, but actually there in the flesh, experiencing what it's really like in the darkest, most alien environment on our own planet. Picture this. You're standing on a beach, waves lapping at your feet, and someone offers you a one-way ticket to the bottom of the ocean, 5,000 meters down, 3 miles beneath the surface. Deeper than Mount Fuji is tall. You'd probably laugh it off, right? The deep sea is for documentaries, for grainy footage of anglerfish and those weird translucent creatures that look like they were designed by a committee of horror writers who got really into bioluminescence. But here's the thing, and let's be absolutely clear about this from the start. The deep sea isn't just inhospitable, it isn't just dangerous. It's a realm so fundamentally hostile to human life that calling it deadly would be like calling the surface of the sun a bit warm. The deep ocean is Earth's largest habitat, covering more than 60% of our planet's surface, and it wants you dead with a passion that borders on the personal. Forget the castles and chivalry Hollywood sold you. Forget the romantic notion of underwater kingdoms and singing mermaids. The deep sea is a pitch-black, crushing, freezing hell that makes the vacuum of space look downright cozy by comparison. At least in space, you die quickly. Down there, the ocean takes its time with you, and every second of your descent into that alien world would be a masterclass in creative ways the universe can make a human body fail. You think you know what pressure means? You think you understand cold? You think darkness is just the absence of light? Oh, you sweet summer child. You have no idea. None. The deep sea is waiting, and it's patient, and it's hungry, and tonight we're going to walk through exactly what would happen to you, step by agonizing step, if you actually tried to survive down there. Spoiler alert, you wouldn't, not for a day, not for an hour, probably not even for the time it takes you to watch this video. But we're going to try anyway, because the only thing more fascinating than the deep sea's beauty is its capacity for turning human beings into protein paste. So take a deep breath, because it might be your last good one. We're going diving, and we're not coming back the same. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe so you'll always know when a new one is uploaded. And I'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments where you're listening from and what time of day it is for you. Let's ease into tonight's journey together with a little context, shall we? Because before we throw you into the abyss like chum into shark-infested waters, you need to understand what the deep sea actually is. Most people think of the ocean as, well, the ocean, that thing you swim in on vacation. That body of water where you nervously check for jellyfish and worry about stepping on a sea urchin. Maybe you've snorkeled in relatively shallow water, seen some colorful fish, felt like Jacques Cousteau for about 15 minutes before your mask started leaking and you remembered you're actually terrified of anything that might brush against your leg. But the ocean you know, the ocean you've experienced, represents roughly 3% of the actual ocean. 3%. The rest, that's the deep sea. And it's divided into zones that sound like levels in a video game designed by someone who hates players. First, you've got the sunlight zone, 0 to 200 meters down, where 90% of marine life hangs out because they're smart enough to stay where the light is. Below that, the twilight zone, 200 to 1,000 meters, where the light fades to almost nothing and the water temperature drops like your hopes and dreams, when you check your bank account after a night of drunk online shopping. Then comes the midnight zone, 1,000 to 4,000 meters down, where sunlight is just a distant memory and the pressure starts getting serious. Below that, the abyssal zone, 4,000 to 6,000 meters, which is basically the ocean's way of saying turn back now or forever hold your peace. And finally, if you're truly committed to making terrible life choices, there's the Hadal zone, 6,000 meters and deeper, found only in ocean trenches, where the pressure is so intense that it makes the abyssal zone look like a pleasant afternoon at a suburban swimming pool. We're going to focus on the abyssal zone tonight because that's where the real nightmare begins. 5,000 meters down. That's our target. That's where we're dropping you. Now you might be thinking, how bad could it really be? It's just water, right? Wrong. So spectacularly, magnificently wrong that if wrongness were an Olympic sport, you'd take home the gold, silver, and bronze medals, then get caught doping and still somehow end up on a Wheaties box. The deep sea isn't just water. It's a hostile alien environment that happens to be made of water, and the difference between those two things is roughly the difference between a house cat and a Bengal tiger. Sure, they're both cats, but one will curl up on your lap and purr, while the other will rip your face off and use your skull as a chew toy. The deep sea is the Bengal tiger of aquatic environments, except the Bengal tiger is also on fire, and the fire is made of ice. And somehow that makes perfect sense once you're down there dying. So here we are, standing at the edge of revelation, about to take our first step into understanding just how thoroughly the deep sea wants to murder you. But before we get to the dying, we need to talk about pressure, because pressure is the deep sea's opening act. It's a amuse-bouche of agony, the appetizer before the main course of horrors. You experience pressure every day. Of course, right now, sitting wherever you are, the atmosphere above you is pressing down with a force of about 14.7 pounds per square inch. That's one atmosphere of pressure, and your body is perfectly designed to handle it because you've been dealing with it since the moment you were born. You don't even notice it. It's like background noise, like the hum of a refrigerator, or your neighbor's terrible taste in music. But here's the thing about water, it's heavy, much heavier than air. For every 10 meters you descend into the ocean, the pressure increases by 1 atmosphere. Let that sink in for a moment. 10 meters, 33 feet, that's roughly the height of a 3-story building. Drop down that far underwater, and you've just doubled the pressure on your body. Every inch of your skin is now experiencing almost 30 pounds per square inch instead of 15. Your body can handle this, more or less. Scuba divers do it all the time. They learn to equalize, to let their bodies adjust, to breathe compressed air that matches the water pressure around them. It's doable, uncomfortable, sometimes painful if you don't do it right, but doable. Now let's do some math. And I promise this is the fun kind of math, the kind where the numbers get so big they stop meaning anything and start becoming existential threats. At 5,000 meters, our destination in the abyssal zone, you're at 500 atmospheres of pressure. 500. That means every square inch of your body is experiencing 7,350 pounds of force, more than 3.5 tons per square inch. Imagine a fully grown elephant standing on a postage stamp, and that postage stamp is every single square inch of your body simultaneously. Your chest, your face, your eyeballs, your eardrums, Every bit of you is being compressed with a force that would turn a foam coffee cup into a tiny, dense pellet the size of a thimble. Scientists who send equipment down to these depths often attach styrofoam cups to the outside of their submarines as a fun experiment. When they come back up, those cups are miniaturized, compressed into adorable little versions of themselves, perfect for a dollhouse. It's cute. It's also exactly what would happen to your head. Now, you might be thinking, okay, pressure is bad, I get it. But what if I held my breath really well? What if I was really strong? What if I did a lot of core exercises and built up my resistance? And this is where we need to have a serious conversation about what pressure actually does to a human body, because it's not just about being crushed, though there is definitely crushing involved. Let's start with the air spaces in your body, because you have more of those than you probably realize, and every single one of them is a potential implosion waiting to happen. Your lungs, obviously, those are big air-filled sacs that you rely on for that whole breathing thing you're so fond of. At sea level, they hold about 6 liters of air. 6 liters of air at 1 atmosphere of pressure. Now, imagine taking those lungs down to 500 atmospheres. According to Boyle's law, which is a gas law and not, sadly, a law about how to properly boil vegetables, the volume of a gas is inversely proportional to the pressure applied to it, and in simpler terms, if you increase pressure, you decrease volume. At 500 atmospheres, those 6 liters of air in your lungs would want to compress down to about 12 milliliters. 12 milliliters. That's less than a tablespoon. Your lungs, those nice spongy organs that keep you alive, would try to collapse down to the size of a large grape. Both lungs combined would be about the size of a walnut. Now, your lungs can't actually compress that much because they're not just balloons. They're attached to your rib cage, supported by muscles and tissue, connected to your bronchial tubes and trachea. So what happens instead is that the pressure tries to compress them anyway, your rib cage tries to hold firm, and the result is catastrophic structural failure. Your ribs would crack inward like a collapsing building. Your lung tissue would tear and hemorrhage. Blood vessels would burst. Your lungs would essentially explode inward, filling with blood and fluid, and you'd drown in your own bodily fluids while simultaneously being crushed. It's efficient, really. The deep sea doesn't waste time with single methods of killing you when it can stack several at once for maximum effect. But wait, as they say in infomercials that air at 3 in the morning, there's more. Your sinuses, those air-filled cavities in your skull that make your voice sound weird when you have a cold, would also try to compress. The pressure differential would cause them to fill with blood, a condition divers call a sinus squeeze, though at 500 atmospheres, calling it a squeeze is like calling a nuclear explosion a minor combustion event. Your sinuses would hemorrhage violently, blood pouring from your nose and down your throat, filling your mouth with the copper taste of your own rapidly failing biology. Let's talk about your ears now, because they're about to have a really bad time. And by bad time, I mean cease functioning as ears and become decorative holes in the side of your head. Your ear has 3 parts. The outer ear, which is basically just a funnel for sound. The middle ear, which contains your eardrum and 3 tiny bones called ossicles. And the inner ear, which handles balance and converts sound into electrical signals your brain can understand. The middle ear is the problem here, because it's an air-filled space separated from the outside world by your eardrum that thin membrane that vibrates when sound waves hit it. Under normal circumstances, the pressure in your middle ear equals the pressure outside your eardrum, and everything is fine. When you go up in an airplane or drive through mountains, you feel your ears pop as they equalize pressure. It's slightly uncomfortable but manageable. In the deep sea, at 500 atmospheres of pressure, your eardrums would rupture instantly. Not slowly, not with warning, but instantly. The pressure differential would be so extreme that those thin membranes would tear like tissue paper in a hurricane. You'd feel a sharp, stabbing pain, followed by cold seawater flooding into your middle ear, destroying your sense of balance completely. You'd immediately become disoriented, unable to tell up from down, left from right, spinning in the darkness while your inner ears sent panicked, contradictory signals to your brain. But ruptured eardrums would be the least of your problems, because the pressure would continue pushing inward through your now destroyed eardrums and into your middle ear, and from there into your inner ear, rupturing the delicate structures of your cochlea, destroying the tiny hair cells that allow you to hear. You'd be deaf within seconds, though you'd probably be too busy dying to notice. The pressure would continue inward through your eustachian tubes and into your nasopharynx, that space at the back of your nose and throat, filling it with compressed seawater, adding to the drowning sensation as your destroyed lungs and hemorrhaging sinuses continue their own personal apocalypse. And we haven't even gotten to your eyes yet. Oh, your eyes. Your beautiful, delicate, soft, squishy eyeballs that you use to read these words right now. Each eyeball is essentially a fluid-filled sphere held in a socket in your skull. The fluid inside your eyes, the vitreous humor and aqueous humor, are mostly incompressible because they're liquid, not gas. That sounds like good news until you realize that the pressure outside your eyes is trying to compress everything, and your eyeballs are the path of least resistance. The pressure would cause your eyes to bulge outward grotesquely, straining against your eyelids and the muscles that hold them in place. Your optic nerves, those delicate bundles of nerve fibers that connect your eyes to your brain, would be stretched and damaged. The blood vessels in your eyes would burst, flooding your vision with red before going completely dark. You'd be blind within seconds, your last sight being the impossible darkness of the deep sea, rushing toward you. Though calling it rushing implies movement when really it's just there, waiting, always there. Now let's address the elephant in the room, or rather the U-shaped protein paste about to be created in the ocean. We've talked about the air spaces in your body, but what about the solid parts? Your bones, your muscles, your organs that don't contain air pockets? Surely those can withstand pressure, right? They're solid, after all, dense, substantial. Here's the uncomfortable truth. They can withstand some pressure, but not this pressure, not even close. The human body is roughly 60% water by weight, and water is incompressible, which means that parts of you made mostly of water, like your muscles and organs, wouldn't be crushed the same way your lungs would be. That's the good news. The bad news is that not being crushed is very different from being fine. Your cells, those tiny building blocks that make up every tissue in your body, are held together by membranes. Cell membranes are incredibly thin, only about 7 to 10 nanometers thick, and they maintain their structure through a delicate balance of chemical and physical forces. At 500 atmospheres of pressure, this balance is destroyed, The pressure causes cell membranes to become rigid and malfunction. Proteins in your cells, which need to fold into specific shapes to function properly, can't maintain those shapes under extreme pressure. Enzymes that catalyze essential chemical reactions in your body stop working. Your cells essentially freeze in place, unable to carry out the basic functions of life. It's called pressure denaturation. And it's the same reason why deep-sea creatures that live under these conditions have specially adapted proteins that can function under pressure. Your proteins aren't adapted. They're designed for 1 atmosphere, maybe 2 or 3 if you're a pearl diver or a Navy SEAL, but definitely not 500. At 500 atmospheres, your proteins give up on life before you do. But it gets worse, because of course it does. The pressure doesn't just affect your cells at a molecular level, it affects the physical structure of your tissues. Your blood vessels, those tubes that carry blood throughout your body, would be compressed. Your arteries and veins would narrow, making it nearly impossible for your heart to pump blood through them. Your heart, speaking of which, would be working against 500 atmospheres of pressure, trying to push blood through compressed vessels while itself being compressed. It's like trying to blow up a balloon while someone is sitting on your chest, and the balloon is also made of steel and filled with concrete. Your heart would fail within seconds, either from the sheer physical impossibility of beating against that much pressure, or from the fact that its own tissue would be compressed and damaged beyond function. Let's paint a picture of your descent, shall we? Because we've talked about what would happen at depth, but we haven't discussed the journey down. And oh, what a journey it would be. Imagine you're at the surface, maybe on a boat or a ship, looking down into the blue water. It's a nice day. The sun is shining. The water is that beautiful azure color that makes people want to take vacation photos and post them on social media with captions like paradise or living my best life, or you take a breath, maybe your last conscious one, and you start to sink. For the first 10 meters, everything seems almost normal. The water is bright, illuminated by sunlight. You can see the surface above you, the hull of the boat, maybe some fish swimming by. The pressure increases, and you feel it in your ears. You try to equalize to pop them like you would on an airplane, but it's not quite working right. There's a pressure building behind your eyes, in your sinuses. It's uncomfortable, but not yet. Painful. You keep sinking. 20 meters down. 30. The light is starting to fade now. The brilliant blue turning darker, more mysterious. The pressure in your ears is building to a painful crescendo, and then suddenly there's a sharp pain and a muffled pop as your eardrums rupture. Cold water floods into your middle ear, and immediately you lose all sense of which way is up. You're tumbling now, spinning in the water, disoriented and panicking. But you keep sinking, because the ocean doesn't care about your panic. 50 meters down, the light is dim now, a twilight blue that's actually quite beautiful if you weren't currently experiencing multiple systems failure. Your sinuses start to hemorrhage, blood streaming from your nose, clouding the water around you in dark ribbons. Your chest is starting to hurt, a deep, crushing ache as your lungs struggle against the increasing pressure. 100 meters, 200. You've passed beyond the depth that recreational scuba divers can reach. You're in the twilight zone now, and the light is almost gone. The pressure has increased to 21 atmospheres. more than 300 pounds per square inch. Your ribs are creaking, straining, beginning to crack. Blood vessels throughout your body are bursting, unable to withstand the pressure. You're bleeding internally in dozens of places at once. Your eyes, bulging grotesquely from their sockets, have ruptured blood vessels, turning your vision into a red haze before it goes dark entirely. You might be screaming, but you can't hear it through your destroyed ears and the water flooding your throat and lungs. 500 meters down, you're in the midnight zone now, and there is no light except for the occasional bioluminescent creature drifting past, their glow reflecting off the cloud of your own blood and other bodily fluids that surrounds you like a gruesome aura. At this depth, the pressure is 51 atmospheres. Your lungs have collapsed, your chest cavity filled with blood and seawater. Your ribs have cracked inward, some of them puncturing your lungs and other organs. You're drowning, but you're also bleeding to death internally. But you're also going into shock from the pressure and pain, and your brain is trying to shut down to escape the overwhelming cascade of agony signals it's receiving from every nerve ending in your body. But the ocean isn't done with you yet. Not even close. 1,000 meters. You've descended through the midnight zone and you're approaching the abyssal zone. The pressure is now 101 atmospheres, 1,485 pounds per square inch. Every cell in your body is under siege. The proteins in your cells are denaturing, unfolding, losing their function. Your cellular membranes are rigid and failing. Your DNA, that beautiful double helix that contains all the information needed to make you who you are, is being compressed and damaged. You are, on a molecular level, ceasing to be organized matter and becoming disorganized mush. 2,000 meters, 3,000, 4,000. The pressure continues to increase with each meter of descent, and your body continues to fail in new and creative ways. Bones that hadn't yet broken are breaking now, not from being bent or twisted, but simply from being compressed beyond their structural limits. Your skull, that nice thick bone that protects your brain, is flexing inward. The pressure on your brain is increasing, and brain tissue, despite being mostly water, can only handle so much compression before it stops functioning. You're not conscious anymore, thankfully. Your brain shut down somewhere around 2,000 meters, unable to process the sheer magnitude of damage it was receiving information about. But your body continues to sink, pulled down by its own weight, no longer buoyant now that every airspace has been eliminated. 5,000 meters. We've arrived at our destination, the depth we set out to reach. The pressure is 500 atmospheres, 7,350 pounds per square inch. The temperature here is just above freezing, hovering around 2 degrees Celsius. It's pitch black. The only light comes from the bioluminescent creatures that live here, adapted to this environment over millions of years of evolution, with proteins that can function under pressure without gas-filled swim bladders, with bodies designed for a world of crushing darkness. And there you are, or rather, there's what's left of you. Your body, compressed and destroyed, continues its journey downward until it reaches the seafloor. What lands on that endless plain of sediment is barely recognizable as human. Your lungs are collapsed and hemorrhaged beyond recognition. Your ribs are broken and displaced. Your skull is fractured, your brain compressed and non-functional. Your eyes are destroyed, burst from their sockets, or crushed beyond any ability to see. Your ears are ruined, flooded with water. The delicate structures that once allowed you to hear music and conversation now just so much damaged tissue. Every bone in your body has been stressed beyond its breaking point. Your organs, compressed and denatured at a cellular level, have ceased any semblance of normal function. You are dead, obviously. So incredibly dead that it would be redundant to say you're dead, except that I just did, because it bears repeating. You didn't last a day in the deep sea. You didn't last an hour. You barely lasted the 10 to 15 minutes it took for your body to sink from the surface to the abyssal zone, and you were effectively dead within the first few minutes of that descent. The deep sea killed you with contemptuous ease, using nothing but the weight of water pressing down from above. It didn't need teeth or claws or venom. It didn't need to chase you or hunt you or even acknowledge your existence. It simply was, and you were in it, and that was enough. But here's the thing, and this is what really makes the deep sea such a special kind of hell. Everything we've just described, all the crushing and the bursting and the hemorrhaging and the cellular breakdown, that's just from the pressure. That's just one aspect of the deep sea's hostility. We haven't even talked about the temperature yet, or the lack of light, or the toxic chemicals, or the bizarre and terrifying creatures that call this place home. We haven't discussed what would happen if you somehow, impossibly, were able to survive the pressure. If you had some magical pressure suit that kept your body at 1 atmosphere while you explored the abyss, because even then, even with the pressure problem solved, the deep sea would still kill you, just more slowly and with slightly more variety in its methods. Let's imagine, just for fun, that you've got a perfect pressure suit. It's a miracle of engineering keeping your body at normal atmospheric pressure while allowing you to move around freely in the deep sea. You're 5,000 meters down, safe from the crushing pressure, looking out through a reinforced faceplate at the alien world around you. Congratulations, you've solved one problem and created several new ones. First, let's talk about temperature, because the deep sea is cold in a way that makes Antarctic winters look balmy. At 5,000 meters, the water temperature is typically between 1 and 4 degrees Celsius, just barely above freezing. The water doesn't freeze because of the salt content and the pressure, but it's cold enough that without thermal protection, you develop hypothermia within minutes. Now, your pressure suit would presumably include some kind of thermal insulation, because engineers aren't complete idiots. But let's imagine it fails. Let's say there's a tear in the suit, or the heating system malfunctions, or you've been down there so long that your batteries are dying and the thermal regulation is the first system to go. What happens then? Hypothermia happens, and it happens fast. In water that cold, you'd lose body heat 25 times faster than you would in air of the same temperature. Water is an excellent conductor of heat, which is great for cooking pasta, but terrible for maintaining human body temperature. Your body normally maintains a core temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. When that starts to drop, bad things happen quickly. At 35 degrees, you start shivering violently as your body tries to generate heat through muscle contractions. Your thinking becomes fuzzy, your speech slurred, you're clumsy, dropping things, unable to perform simple tasks. This is mild hypothermia, and at this stage, you can still recover if you get warm quickly. At 33 degrees, you enter moderate hypothermia. The shivering stops Not because you're warming up, but because your body is running out of energy to shiver. Your muscles are stiff and uncoordinated. Your skin is pale or blue. Your heart rate slows down. You're confused, possibly irrational, making poor decisions like I should probably take off this pressure suit because I'm feeling too warm, which is your brain malfunctioning and sending you false signals. At 30 degrees or below, you're in severe hypothermia. Your heartbeat is irregular. You're breathing shallow. You're barely conscious, if conscious at all. Your body is shutting down, prioritizing blood flow to your core organs and abandoning your extremities. Your fingers and toes are functionally dead from lack of blood flow, the tissue freezing and dying. And here's the really fun part. If you're in the deep sea, there's no rescue coming. There's no ambulance, no emergency room, no paramedics with warm blankets and hot coffee. You're 5,000 meters underwater in a damaged pressure suit, hypothermic and alone, and the cold just keeps taking and taking until there's nothing left to take. But let's say your suit's thermal system is working perfectly. You're warm and cozy inside your little human bubble, protected from both pressure and cold. Surely now you're safe, right? Surely now you can actually explore this alien environment without dying horribly? Not quite, because we need to talk about your air supply, and this is where things get complicated in ways that would make a mathematician weep. You need oxygen to live. This is not controversial. Your cells need oxygen to produce energy through cellular respiration, and without it, they die. Simple, right? But the amount of oxygen you need and the way you process it changes dramatically under pressure. At the surface, air is about 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, and about 1% other gases. You breathe this mixture constantly, and it works great. At depth, in a pressure suit or submarine, you're breathing compressed air to match the surrounding pressure. If you're at 500 atmospheres of pressure and you're breathing normal air composition, you're now breathing gas that has a partial pressure of 105 atmospheres of oxygen. That's a problem, a big problem. You're going to die from oxygen toxicity problem. Oxygen, that lovely gas that keeps you alive, becomes toxic at high partial pressures. Above about 1.6 atmospheres of oxygen partial pressure, you start experiencing oxygen toxicity. Symptoms include nausea, dizziness, vision problems, twitching, and eventually seizures. At 105 atmospheres of oxygen, partial pressure, you'd have a seizure within minutes, possibly seconds. You'd convulse violently inside your pressure suit, smashing your head against the faceplate, biting through your own tongue, unable to control your body as your nervous system misfires in response to the toxic oxygen levels. And if you're having a seizure in a pressure suit at 5,000 meters underwater, you're not surviving that. So clearly, you can't breathe normal air composition at depth. You need to adjust the mixture, reduce the oxygen percentage, maybe add some other gases to dilute it. This is what deep-sea divers do when they go to extreme depths. They breathe special gas mixtures called trimix or heliox, which replace some of the nitrogen with helium and reduce the oxygen percentage to safe levels. But even with these special mixtures, there are limits to how deep humans can go, and 5,000 meters is well beyond those limits. Let's talk about nitrogen now, because nitrogen is the silent killer of the deep, the gas that seems harmless until suddenly it very much isn't. At the surface, breathing regular air, nitrogen is inert. It doesn't do anything. It just sits in your lungs, getting absorbed into your bloodstream in small amounts but not really affecting you. This is fine. This is how it should be. At depth, under pressure, nitrogen becomes a problem in two distinct and terrible ways. First, there's nitrogen narcosis, affectionately known as rupture of the deep by divers who have survived it and want to make it sound romantic instead of terrifying. At increased partial pressures, nitrogen has an anesthetic effect on your brain. It's like being drunk, except instead of being at a bar with your friends, you're underwater where any mistake can kill you. It starts around 30 meters at 4 atmospheres of pressure. You feel slightly euphoric, a little giddy. Your judgment becomes impaired. You might do something stupid like decide to go deeper or remove your regulator to see what happens, or offer to share your air with a passing fish because clearly that fish needs help breathing. At 5 atmospheres, 6 atmospheres, the narcosis intensifies. You're now properly drunk level impaired, unable to think clearly, experiencing hallucinations, possibly convinced that you can breathe water if you just try hard enough. Experienced divers learn to function through mild narcosis, to recognize the symptoms and compensate for them, but at extreme depths, nitrogen narcosis becomes completely incapacitating. At 5,000 meters, at 500 atmospheres of pressure, if you were somehow breathing a gas mixture that still contained nitrogen, you'd be so narked that you'd be essentially non-functional, a giggling, hallucinating mess, unable to perform even the simplest tasks. But nitrogen narcosis is actually the less dangerous of nitrogen's two tricks. The really scary one is decompression, sickness, also known as the bends, and at 5,000 meters, the bends would be so severe that calling it the bends seems quaint, like calling a tsunami a splash. Here's how it works. When you breathe compressed gas at depth, the nitrogen in that gas dissolves into your bloodstream and tissues at higher concentrations than normal. The deeper you go and the longer you stay there, the more nitrogen gets dissolved into your body. This is fine as long as you stay at depth. The nitrogen is dissolved in solution, just hanging out in your tissues, not causing problems. The problem comes when you ascend, when you return to lower pressure. As pressure decreases, the nitrogen that was dissolved in your tissues wants to come out of solution to return to gas form. If you ascend slowly, the nitrogen can be released gradually through your lungs as you breathe. This is why divers have to make decompression stops on their way up, pausing at various depths to let nitrogen off gas safely. If you ascend too quickly, the nitrogen comes out of solution too fast, forming bubbles in your bloodstream and tissues. It's exactly like opening a shaken bottle of soda. At normal pressure, the carbon dioxide is dissolved in the liquid. Release the pressure suddenly by opening the cap, and the CO2 comes out of solution violently, creating foam and fizz. Now imagine that happening inside your body, in your blood vessels, in your joints, in your spinal cord, in your brain. The bubbles cause pain, terrible pain in your joints as they expand and press against nerves. They cause paralysis as bubbles in your spinal cord damage nerve tissue. They cause strokes as bubbles in your brain cut off blood flow to critical areas. They cause pulmonary embolisms as bubbles travel to your lungs and block blood vessels there. They cause death, frequently and unpleasantly, as your cardiovascular system tries to pump blood full of nitrogen bubbles and fails catastrophically. And remember, we're talking about ascending from 5,000 meters from 500 atmospheres of pressure. The amount of nitrogen that would be dissolved in your tissues at that depth is astronomical. Even if you ascended slowly, even if you made decompression stops, you'd need to stop at dozens, maybe hundreds of different depths for hours or days at each stop to safely off-gas the nitrogen. The total decompression time for a dive that deep would be measured in weeks, possibly months. And if you had to make an emergency ascent, if something went wrong and you had to get to the surface quickly, you'd die from the bends. Not might die, would die. With absolute certainty, would die. The nitrogen bubbles would form in every system of your body simultaneously, causing massive, irreversible damage. Your last moments would be spent in agony as your body essentially fizzes itself to death from the inside out, turning your bloodstream into a foam of destroyed cells and gas bubbles, your tissues expanding and rupturing, your nervous system short-circuiting as bubbles press against and destroy delicate nerve fibers. So we've established that you can't breathe normal air at 5,000 meters. Too much oxygen, too much nitrogen, both trying to kill you in different ways. What if we used a different gas mixture? What if we filled your pressure suit with helium instead? Helium doesn't cause narcosis like nitrogen does. It doesn't have the same solubility issues. Surely helium is the answer, right? Well, yes and no. Deep-sea divers do use helium mixtures for very deep dives, but helium has its own problems. First, helium is a tiny molecule, much smaller than nitrogen or oxygen. This means it can leak through seals and valves more easily. Your pressure suit would need to be absolutely perfectly sealed with no weak points anywhere, or the helium would slowly leak out and water would leak in, which brings us back to the crushing pressure problem we thought we'd solved. Second, helium conducts heat much better than air does. If you're breathing helium, you're losing body heat with every breath as the cold helium enters your lungs, absorbs heat from your body, and exits. You'd need even more thermal regulation to compensate, more battery power, more systems that can fail. Third, and this is my personal favorite, helium affects your voice. You've probably breathed helium from a balloon at a party and laughed at your squeaky voice. Now imagine being 5,000 meters underwater in a pressure suit in a life or death situation, trying to communicate with your support team on the surface, and everything you say sounds like you've been inhaling helium at a child's birthday party. Help, my suit is failing. Comes out sounding like a cartoon chipmunk. It's darkly funny right up until you realize that clear communication is essential for survival, and you've just compromised it by breathing a gas that makes you sound ridiculous. But more seriously, at extreme depths, even helium can cause problems. There's a condition called high-pressure nervous syndrome, or HPNS, that occurs when humans are exposed to very high partial pressures of helium. Symptoms include tremors, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, and decreased mental performance. The exact mechanism isn't fully understood, but it seems to be related to helium's effect on nerve cell membranes at high pressures. At 500 atmospheres, you'd almost certainly experience severe HPNS, even with a perfectly balanced gas mixture. You'd be shaking uncontrollably, nauseous, your cognitive abilities impaired, all while trying to operate complex equipment in an environment that will kill you instantly if you make a mistake. Let's move on from the gases you're breathing and talk about what you're seeing, or rather, what you're not seeing. The deep sea is dark, not just dark like nighttime dark, or dark like a cave dark, but dark in a way that's absolute, profound, and total. At 200 meters depth, less than 1% of surface light penetrates. By 1,000 meters, sunlight is completely gone. Not dim, not faint, but gone. 0 photons from the sun reach these depths. The only light that exists in the deep sea comes from bioluminescence, from the creatures that live there producing their own light through chemical reactions. And while bioluminescence is beautiful in documentaries, in person, in the deep sea, it would be terrifying. Imagine floating in absolute darkness, a darkness so complete that even with your eyes fully adjusted, you can see nothing. Not shapes, not shadows, nothing. Your brain, deprived of visual input, might start creating its own images, hallucinations born from sensory deprivation, and then suddenly, out of the darkness, a light appears. Not a friendly light, not a warm light, but a cold blue-green glow attached to something you can't quite make out, something moving toward you or away from you or circling you. You don't know what it is. You don't know if it's a creature the size of your thumb or the size of a bus. You don't know if it's curious, aggressive, or completely indifferent to your existence. All you know is that there's light where there shouldn't be light, and your primate brain evolved on the African savanna where threats were visible and could be understood, is screaming at you that something is wrong, that you shouldn't be here, that you need to leave now. The darkness of the deep sea isn't just an inconvenience that makes it hard to see. It's a psychological weapon that attacks your sanity. Humans are visual creatures. We rely on sight more than any other sense. Take away our vision, and we become disoriented, anxious, frightened. Keep us in darkness long enough, and we start to break down mentally. And in the deep sea, in that absolute darkness, you'd be dependent entirely on the lights built into your pressure suit. If those lights failed, if your batteries died or a circuit shorted, you'd be plunged into a darkness more complete than anything you've ever experienced. You'd be blind in a place where you desperately need to see, where you need to monitor your equipment, navigate your surroundings, watch for threats. You'd be helpless, floating in the void, waiting for your air to run out or your suit to fail or something to find you in the darkness. Speaking of things finding you in the darkness, let's talk about the creatures of the deep sea, because they deserve their own chapter in this catalog of horrors. The deep sea is home to some of the most bizarre, alien-looking organisms on Earth. These aren't the colorful tropical fish you see in aquariums or nature documentaries about coral reefs. These are creatures that evolved in an environment so hostile that they had to become monsters just to survive. Take the anglerfish, for example. You've probably seen pictures of them, the females with their bioluminescent lures dangling in front of their mouths, waiting to attract prey. The males are even weirder. They're tiny parasites that bite onto females and fuse permanently, and their bodies degenerating until they're nothing but a pair of gonads providing sperm. It's grotesque, it's fascinating, and if you saw one up close in the darkness of the deep sea, illuminated only by its own eerie glow and your suit lights, you'd probably scream into your helmet. Or the gulper eel, which is basically a swimming mouth with a tail attached. Its jaw is enormous, capable of unhinging to swallow prey larger than itself, and its body is mostly stomach. It looks like a nightmare a small child might have after watching too many horror movies before bed. Or the fang-toothed fish, which has teeth so large in proportion to its body that they don't fit inside its mouth. The teeth on its lower jaw have special sockets in the fish's skull that the teeth slide into when the mouth is closed, otherwise it would stab itself. Evolution looked at the fang-toothed fish and said, "You know what this creature needs? Teeth so big they require special skull modifications just to exist." Or the vampire squid, which isn't actually a squid or a vampire, but has tentacles lined with sharp spines and can turn itself inside out as a defense mechanism, exposing those spines outward. It also has the largest eyes relative to body size of any animal on Earth, enormous orbs designed to catch the faintest hint of bioluminescence in the darkness. Now here's the thing, most of these creatures are small. The anglerfish is usually less than a foot long. The fangtooth is even smaller, just a few inches. They're not going to attack you. They're not going to try to eat you. You're far too large to be prey, and they've never seen anything like a human before. But you don't know that. You're in the darkness, alone, and suddenly your lights reflect off something moving toward you, something with enormous teeth or bulging eyes or tentacles covered in spines, and your ancient primate brain doesn't care that it's scientifically implausible for this creature to attack you. Your brain just sees teeth and danger and starts flooding your system with adrenaline, making your heart race, your breathing quicken, your hands shake. But not all deep-sea creatures are small. Oh no. Some of them are very, very large, and these are the ones that would truly terrify you if you encountered them in the abyss. Take the giant squid, for instance. Architeuthis ducks. These creatures can grow up to 13 meters long, with eyes the size of dinner plates and tentacles lined with serrated suction cups that can leave circular wounds on anything they grab. For centuries, giant squid were thought to be myths, sea monster stories told by superstitious sailors. Then we started finding them, finding their corpses washed up on beaches or floating in the ocean, and we realized the sailors weren't entirely wrong. These things are monsters. They're real, they exist, and they live in the deep sea. A giant squid has never attacked a human, as far as we know, mostly because humans rarely encounter them. They live at depths between 300 and 1,000 meters, deep enough to avoid casual contact with humans, but shallow enough that they occasionally surface or get caught in fishing nets. But imagine being in your pressure suit at 5,000 meters, minding your own business, trying not to die from any of the 100 other things trying to kill you. And you see movement in the darkness. Your lights catch something pale, something massive, something with arms as thick as your body undulating through the water. You realize it's a squid, but not any squid you've ever seen in a restaurant or aquarium. The squid is enormous, longer than a school bus, and it's coming toward you. Maybe it's curious. Maybe it's never seen a human before and wants to investigate. Maybe it mistakes you for prey or a rival. You don't know. You can't know. All you know is that this creature, with its sharp beak capable of cutting through flesh and its powerful tentacles, is approaching. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. You can't fight it. You can't run from it. Not in a bulky pressure suit underwater where your top speed is maybe a slow walk. You can only watch as it comes closer, hope that it loses interest, and pray that your suit doesn't suddenly look delicious or threatening. And if it does attack, if it grabs your suit with those tentacle-covered suckers, it could damage your seals, compromise your systems, send you plummeting to the seafloor as water rushes in and the pressure equalizes, or it could just drag you deeper, down past 5,000 meters, down into the huddle zone where the pressure is even worse, holding you in its tentacles while you slowly run out of air or your suit fails. But giant squid aren't even the largest creatures in the deep sea. That honor goes to the colossal squid, Mesonychotothis hamiltoni, which is even bigger and more terrifying than its giant cousin. Colossal squid can reach lengths of up to 14 meters and weights of up to 750 kilograms. Unlike giant squid, which have suckers lined with small teeth, colossal squid have hooks, sharp, rotating hooks on their tentacles designed to hold on to prey while they tear into it with their enormous beak. They're ambush predators, living at depths between 2,000 and 4,000 meters, waiting in the darkness for prey to pass by. When they strike, they're fast and powerful, capable of grabbing prey and pulling it to their beak in seconds. Very few colossal squid have ever been observed. Most of what we know about them comes from specimens found in the stomachs of sperm whales, their only known predator. The scars found on sperm whales, circular marks from colossal squid hooks, can be the size of dinner plates. These creatures fight back when attacked, leaving permanent marks on whales, which are among the largest animals to have ever existed. Let that sink in. Sperm whales, massive marine mammals that can weigh up to 57,000 kilograms and reach lengths of 20 meters, bear scars from battles with colossal squid. And you're going to be down there in your pressure suit, 5,000 meters deep, in their territory, looking like the strangest, slowest prey item they've ever seen. Now, would a colossal squid actually attack you? Probably not. You're not part of their normal diet, and they're likely as confused by your presence as you would be by theirs. But the key word there is probably. We don't know enough about colossal squid behavior to say with certainty what they would or wouldn't do. We don't know if they're territorial, if they're curious, if they mistake unusual objects for prey. What we do know is that they're enormous, powerful, equipped with weapons that can scar whales, and they live in the exact environment you're trying to explore. The fact that they probably won't attack you is cold comfort when you're in the darkness and you catch a glimpse of something massive moving at the edge of your lights. Let's talk about something smaller but arguably more dangerous than giant squid, the deep sea jellies. Jellyfish, or jellies as marine biologists prefer to call them since they're not actually fish, are found throughout the ocean, including in the deep sea. And some of them are so toxic that a single touch could kill you, even through the gloves of your pressure suit if there's any weakness in the material. Take the box jellyfish, Chironex fleckeri, which isn't typically found in the deep sea but illustrates the principle nicely. Box jellies are among the most venomous creatures on Earth. Their tentacles are lined with millions of nematocysts, tiny harpoon-like structures that inject venom on contact. The venom attacks the heart, nervous system, and skin cells simultaneously. Victims describe the pain as excruciating, like being branded with hot irons all over their body. Death can occur within minutes from cardiac arrest. Now, box jellies live in shallow tropical waters, not the deep sea, but the deep sea has its own varieties of toxic jellies, and many of them haven't been studied well enough to know exactly how dangerous they are. The thing about jellies is that they're hard to see. They're translucent, sometimes completely transparent, and in the darkness of the deep sea, you wouldn't notice them until you were right on top of one or it was right on top of you. Your lights might catch a faint shimmer, a ghostly outline in the water, and then suddenly you're tangled in tentacles, nematocysts firing venom trying to penetrate your suit. Even if your suit protects you from direct contact, Some jellies have tentacles that can extend for dozens of meters. You could blunder into tentacles without ever seeing the main body of the jelly, suddenly finding yourself wrapped in nearly invisible threads that are trying to kill you. And if your suit has any weak points, any small tears or degraded seals, the venom can find its way in. A tiny exposure might not kill you immediately, but it could cause severe pain, muscle spasms, difficulty breathing. In a pressure suit at 5,000 meters, any medical emergency is a potential death sentence. There's no calling for help, no emergency services, no way to remove your suit to treat the injury without immediately dying from pressure. You're stuck in your suit with whatever is happening to you, hoping it's not fatal, unable to do anything but endure. Beyond the creatures that might actively harm you, there are the creatures that are just so alien, so bizarre, that encountering them would be psychologically damaging. The deep sea is full of animals that look like they were designed by a committee of horror writers, surrealist artists, and people who failed biology but really enjoyed the nightmares it gave them. There's the barrel-eye fish, for instance, which has a transparent head. You read that correctly. Transparent. You can see its brain, its eyes, all the inner workings of its skull through a clear dome. Its eyes are tubular and point upward, watching for prey silhouetted against the faint light from above. And they're bright green. This fish looks like a failed experiment in creating biological robots. Something that should be in a science fiction movie about genetic engineering gone wrong, not swimming around in Earth's oceans. Or the sea pig, which is actually a type of sea cucumber that lives on the abyssal seafloor. It has multiple legs, tubular feet that it uses to walk across the bottom, and it feeds on organic detritus that falls from above. It looks like a pink, bloated insect the size of your hand waddling around in the darkness. And it's weirdly cute in photographs, but would probably be deeply unsettling to watch in person, moving through your lights like some kind of deep-sea Roomba cleaning up the ocean floor. Or the giant isopod, which is basically a pill bug on steroids. Pill bugs, also called roly-polies, are those little armored insects you find in gardens that curl up into balls when threatened. Now imagine one that's half a meter long, with compound eyes and multiple legs, scuttling across the seafloor or swimming through the water column. They're scavengers, feeding on dead whales and fish that sink to the bottom, and they can go years without eating. Their metabolism's so slow that they barely need energy. Encountering a giant isopod wouldn't be dangerous, but it would be deeply, viscerally wrong in a way that your brain couldn't quite process. Your mind would keep insisting that pill bugs are supposed to be small, that they're supposed to be in gardens, not down here in the abyss being the size of a small dog. The cognitive dissonance alone might be enough to cause a panic attack, especially when combined with all the other stresses of being in a pressure suit at 5,000 meters. Let's talk about food and waste, because even if you somehow survived everything else, you'd still need to eat, drink, and excrete waste. And doing those things in a pressure suit at 5,000 meters is somewhere between extremely difficult and completely impossible. Your suit would need to have a built-in life support system, obviously. Water recycling, probably similar to what's used on the International Space Station, where your urine is filtered and purified back into drinking water. It sounds disgusting, but it's efficient, and in an environment where you can't exactly pop up to the surface to refill your water bottle, efficiency matters. You'd be drinking your own recycled urine, and you'd need to be okay with that. both psychologically and physically. Any contamination in the recycling system, any bacteria that survived the filtration, could make you sick. And being sick in a pressure suit at 5,000 meters is a special kind of nightmare. Food would be even more complicated. You'd need something that doesn't spoil, doesn't take up much space, provides adequate nutrition, and can be consumed inside a pressure suit. Probably some kind of nutrient paste or liquid meal replacement consumed through a tube or straw built into your helmet. It would be bland, unappetizing, and deeply depressing to eat, but it would keep you alive. The act of eating would be joyless, a purely mechanical process of getting calories into your body so it can continue functioning. And waste disposal, that's where things get really uncomfortable. You'd need some kind of catheter system for urine connected to the water recycling system. For solid waste, you'd be wearing something like a diaper, a maximum absorbency garment similar to what astronauts wear during spacewalks or long missions. You'd defecate into this garment, and then you'd continue wearing it until you could return to the surface or to a habitat where you could remove your suit and clean up hours or days of sitting in your own waste. The smell trapped inside your suit with you, the discomfort and humiliation constant and inescapable. It's degrading, dehumanizing, and absolutely necessary if you want to survive more than a few hours at depth. The deep sea doesn't care about your dignity. It doesn't care that you're a human being who's supposed to use toilets and have privacy and maintain some semblance of civilized behavior. It just is indifferent and hostile, and if you want to exist in it, you have to accept that you're going to lose some of your humanity in the process. Now let's discuss what happens when something goes wrong with your suit, because in an environment this hostile, when something goes wrong, it goes wrong catastrophically and usually fatally. Let's start with a small leak. Maybe a seal degrades, or a joint develops a tiny crack, or something scratches across your suit and creates a microscopic hole. Water starts seeping in. At 500 atmospheres of pressure, even the tiniest hole would cause water to jet into your suit with incredible force. The stream would be thin, almost like a knife, cutting through the air in your suit. And it would be cold, so cold that it would feel like being stabbed with ice. The leak might start small, but it would rapidly widen as the pressure exploited any weakness in the material. Within seconds or minutes, your suit would be flooding, water pouring in faster than any pump could remove it, the pressure inside your suit rapidly equalizing with the pressure outside. As the pressure inside increased, you would start experiencing all those fun effects we discussed earlier. Your lungs would compress, your ears would rupture, your blood vessels would burst. You would drown while simultaneously being crushed, and there would be nothing you could do to stop it. You couldn't patch the leak while wearing the suit because you'd need to depressurize the suit to work on it, and depressurizing would kill you instantly. You couldn't remove the suit to escape because removing it would also kill you instantly. You'd be trapped inside a failing pressure vessel at the bottom of the ocean, watching water pour in, knowing exactly what was about to happen to you, and being completely powerless to prevent it. Or imagine your power system fails. Your batteries, stressed by the cold and the pressure, finally give out. Your lights go dark first, plunging you into absolute blackness. Then your heating system fails, and the cold starts seeping in, slowly at first, then faster as your body heat is drawn away by the frigid water outside. Your communications go dead, cutting you off from any support team on the surface. Your oxygen recycling system stops working, and the CO2 scrubbers cease functioning. Carbon dioxide starts building up in your suit, making you feel short of breath, giving you a headache, making you dizzy and confused. You start taking deeper breaths, trying to get more oxygen, but there is no more oxygen, just more CO2, and you're slowly suffocating in the darkness, hypothermic and alone, knowing you're going to die but not knowing exactly when, just waiting for your oxygen to run out or your body to shut down from the cold. Let's consider what happens if you get stuck. Maybe you're exploring the seafloor and your suit catches on something, a rock formation or a piece of wreckage or debris. Maybe your foot gets wedged in a crevice or a piece of equipment tangles in something. You're stuck, unable to move, and the clock is ticking on your air supply and battery life. At the surface, being stuck might be annoying or embarrassing, but in the deep sea, it's a death sentence. You can't call for help and wait for rescue. Even if your communications are working, there's no rescue team that can reach you at 5,000 meters. The nearest submarine capable of reaching that depth might be thousands of kilometers away, and it would take days or weeks to mount a rescue operation. You don't have days or weeks. You have hours, maybe, before your air runs out or your batteries die or your life support systems fail. You'd have to free yourself or die, and freeing yourself in a bulky pressure suit with limited mobility and no leverage would be nearly impossible. You'd struggle against whatever is holding you, burning through your air faster as your breathing rate increases from exertion and panic. You'd try to remain calm, try to conserve your air, try to think rationally about the problem, but the knowledge that you're stuck at the bottom of the ocean with no hope of rescue would make calm rationality very difficult to maintain. Your movements would become frantic, desperate, wasting even more air, and eventually you'd exhaust yourself, your muscles burning from lactic acid buildup, your lungs screaming for air that isn't there, and you'd die, still stuck to the seafloor, your body remaining there until it was consumed by scavengers or buried by sediment or corroded away by the chemistry of the deep ocean. Or imagine you get disoriented in the absolute darkness with no visual references, no way to see the surface or the seafloor. You lose track of which way is up. Your suit has instruments, presumably a compass and depth gauge and maybe an artificial horizon, but what if they fail? What if you become so panicked or so hypoxic from breathing bad air that you can't read them properly? You'd start swimming in what you think is the right direction, but you'd actually be going sideways, or worse, down, descending deeper into the abyss, increasing the pressure even more, moving farther from any possible safety. By the time you realized your mistake, if you ever did, you'd be even more lost, even deeper, even more thoroughly doomed. Let's talk about the psychological effects of being in the deep sea, because even if your suit is functioning perfectly, even if you're not in immediate physical danger, the mental strain of being in such an alien environment would be tremendous. Humans are not psychologically equipped to handle the deep sea. We evolved in environments with light, with recognizable landmarks, with the ability to see threats coming. The deep sea has none of these things. It's sensory deprivation combined with the knowledge that you're in constant danger, and that combination is psychologically devastating. Studies of people in sensory deprivation tanks floating in darkness and silence for extended periods show that the brain starts to malfunction within hours. People experience hallucinations, time distortion, anxiety, and sometimes panic attacks. And that's in a safe environment, in a tank on land, where they know they can get out at any time. Now imagine the same sensory deprivation, but at 5,000 meters underwater, in a pressure suit with no ability to leave, surrounded by an environment that will kill you instantly if your suit fails. The psychological pressure would be immense, perhaps even worse than the physical pressure. You'd start hearing things that aren't there, voices in the darkness, sounds that your brain invents to fill the silence. You'd see shapes moving at the edge of your vision, gone when you turn to look directly at them. Your sense of time would distort, minutes feeling like hours, hours like days. You'd become paranoid, constantly checking your suit's systems, convinced that something is failing even when all the readouts show everything is normal. You'd feel claustrophobic despite being in the largest space on Earth, because the suit is so confining, so restrictive, and you can't take it off, can't stretch, can't move freely, and the isolation would be crushing. At 5,000 meters, you're more alone than any human has ever been. Astronauts in space have each other and can see Earth below them. Antarctic researchers have their bases and colleagues. But you, in the deep sea, are utterly alone. The nearest human might be 5,000 meters straight up, an impossible distance away, and there's nothing between you and them but water and darkness and pressure. The loneliness would be existential, a bone-deep awareness that if something goes wrong, nobody can help you. You're completely on your own, more isolated than any human being should ever be. Here's a fun thought. Let's say you actually managed to survive at 5,000 meters for several hours. Your suit is working, you're psychologically holding it together, you haven't been attacked by any deep-sea creatures or gotten stuck or lost. Congratulations, you've beaten the odds. Now you have to come back up, and that's where things get really complicated, because the ascent is just as dangerous as the descent, maybe more so. We've already discussed decompression sickness and the nitrogen bubbles that would form in your tissues if you ascended too quickly, but let's really drill down into what that ascent would look like. At 5,000 meters, you've been breathing compressed gas for hours. Your tissues are saturated with dissolved gases. To ascend safely, you'd need to rise slowly, very slowly, stopping at regular intervals to allow those gases to off-gas through your lungs. The standard safe ascent rate for scuba divers is about 10 meters per minute, with safety stops at various depths. But that's for dives to maybe 30 or 40 meters, not 5,000. For a dive to 5,000 meters, the ascent would need to be much slower, and the decompression stops much longer. You'd probably need to stop every 100 meters or so and wait there for hours, allowing your tissues to release their dissolved gases gradually. The total ascent time could easily be several days, possibly a week or more. And during all that time, you'd still be in your pressure suit, still in the water, still dependent on your life support systems continuing to function. Your food would run out. Your water recycling system would be strained beyond its design limits. Your waste management system, never pleasant to begin with, would become completely overwhelmed. You'd be exhausted, hungry, sitting in your own filth, waiting at each decompression stop while your body slowly, gradually releases the gases that are trying to kill you. And if anything went wrong during the ascent, if your air ran low or your batteries died or your suit developed a leak, you'd have to make a choice. Continue the slow ascent and hope you can survive long enough to complete it, or make an emergency ascent and accept that you'll die from the bends instead of from whatever immediate crisis you're facing. It's a choice between dying slowly over hours or dying somewhat less slowly over hours, and neither option is good. Let's imagine you make it to the surface. Against all odds, defying probability and common sense, you've survived the descent, the time at depth, and the ascent. Your suit is somehow still functioning, you're somehow still sane, and you've completed all your decompression stops. You breach the surface, sunlight hitting your faceplate for the first time in days, and you think you're safe. You're not. Coming out of a deep dive is a medical emergency, even under the best circumstances. Your body has been under tremendous stress, your tissues potentially damaged at a cellular level from the pressure and the dissolved gases. You'd need immediate medical attention, hyperbaric treatment possibly, definitely monitoring for delayed decompression sickness symptoms that can appear hours or even days after surfacing. But let's say the medical team is ready, they get you out of your suit into a hyperbaric chamber if needed, and you survive the immediate post-dive period. Congratulations, you've actually survived a day in the deep sea. You're a statistical miracle, a data point that breaks all expectations. What does it cost you? Physically, you'd be wrecked. Even if you avoided obvious injuries like the bends or nitrogen narcosis or hypothermia, your body would be damaged in subtle ways. Your joints would ache from the pressure stress. Your tissues would be inflamed. Your immune system would be suppressed from the stress hormones flooding your system for hours or days. You'd be exhausted beyond anything you've ever experienced. The kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't fully fix, that lingers for weeks. Psychologically, you'd be traumatized. Post-traumatic stress disorder is almost guaranteed after an experience that intense and terrifying. You'd have nightmares about the darkness, about your suit failing, about being trapped at the bottom of the ocean. You'd probably develop phobias, maybe of water, maybe of enclosed spaces, maybe just a general anxiety disorder that makes everyday life difficult. The deep sea would have marked you, changed you, left its fingerprints on your psyche in ways that would never fully heal. And for what? What did you gain from this experience? You visited a place that humans weren't meant to go, saw things that humans weren't meant to see, and survived only through a combination of technology, luck, and sheer stubborn refusal to die. Was it worth it? That's a question only you could answer, and the answer would probably depend on how long ago the dive was and whether the nightmares had started to fade yet. Now let's talk about some of the more exotic ways the deep sea could kill you, because we've covered the obvious ones like pressure and drowning and hypothermia, but the abyss has more tricks up its sleeve. For instance, there's the question of toxic chemicals. The deep sea floor isn't just mud and sand. In many places, it's geologically active, with hydrothermal vents spewing superheated water loaded with dissolved minerals and chemicals. These vents, also called black smokers or white smokers depending on the minerals they're releasing, create clouds of chemically rich water that spreads out along the seafloor. Some of these chemicals are toxic to humans. Hydrogen sulfide, for instance, which smells like rotten eggs and is produced by many hydrothermal vents, is deadly in high concentrations. It binds to the iron in your blood's hemoglobin, preventing oxygen transport, essentially causing you to suffocate at a cellular level even while you're breathing perfectly good air. At lower concentrations, it causes eye irritation, respiratory problems, and nausea. If your suit happened to develop a leak near a hydrothermal vent, you'd be breathing in hydrogen sulfide along with the seawater, and you'd die from chemical poisoning even faster than you'd die from the pressure or drowning. Or consider the heavy metals dissolved in that vent water: lead, arsenic, mercury, cadmium, all leaching out of the Earth's crust and into the deep ocean. These metals are toxic even in small amounts, causing organ damage, neurological problems, and cancer. A small exposure wouldn't kill you immediately, but it would make you sick. And being sick in a pressure suit at 5,000 meters is, as we've established, a really bad situation. Then there are the bacteria. The deep sea is home to some of the most extreme bacteria on Earth, organisms that thrive in conditions that would kill any surface bacteria instantly. Some of these bacteria are thermophiles, heat-loving organisms that live in the boiling water around hydrothermal vents at temperatures above 100 degrees Celsius. Others are barophiles, pressure-loving organisms that can't survive at surface pressure because they're so adapted to the deep. And some of them are pathogenic, capable of causing infections in humans. If your suit developed a leak and you were exposed to deep sea water, you'd potentially be introducing bacteria into your body that have never encountered a human immune system before. Your immune system wouldn't recognize them, wouldn't know how to fight them, and they might cause infections that are resistant to any antibiotic we've developed because they evolved in complete isolation from modern medicine. Let's consider the effect of the deep sea on your equipment, because even if you survive, your gear might not. The deep ocean is incredibly corrosive. The salt water, the pressure, the cold, the chemicals from hydrothermal vents, all of these factors work together to break down materials that would be perfectly stable at the surface. Metals corrode faster under pressure. Seals and gaskets degrade. Plastic becomes brittle and cracks. Electronic components fail as moisture seeps into supposedly waterproof housings. Every piece of equipment you bring to the deep sea is fighting a losing battle against an environment that wants to reduce it to its component molecules. Your pressure suit, no matter how well designed, would be degrading from the moment you entered the water. The seals would be compressed, stressed, developing microscopic cracks that would eventually become macroscopic leaks. The metal components would be corroding, the protective coatings breaking down under the pressure, and chemical assault. The batteries would be losing capacity faster than normal, the cold and pressure affecting their chemistry. Every system would be running at the edge of its tolerances, and the longer you stayed at depth, the more likely something would fail catastrophically. And it's not just your suit, any equipment you brought with you: cameras, sampling tools, sensors, lights, would all be degrading too. Lights would fail, leaving you in darkness. Cameras would flood, the lenses cracking from pressure. Tools would seize up, their moving parts corroded or jammed. You'd be watching your equipment fail piece by piece, knowing that your suit would eventually join them, wondering which component would go first and whether it would be a critical system or just an inconvenience. The deep sea is patient. It doesn't need to kill you quickly. It can wait for your equipment to fail, can wait for the inevitable moment when something critical breaks and you're no longer protected from the environment around you. And when that moment comes, when you hear the crack of a seal giving way, or the pop of a joint separating, or the hiss of water entering somewhere it shouldn't be, you'd have maybe seconds to react before everything went wrong at once. The deep sea is a war of attrition, and the deep sea always wins eventually. Here's something cheerful to consider. Even if you somehow survived physically, even if you made it to depth and back without your body failing or your equipment failing, you'd still have to deal with the physiological effects of pressure on your tissues at a cellular level, effects that might not show up for days or weeks after your dive. We've talked about decompression sickness, but there are other more subtle forms of pressure damage that can occur. Barotrauma, for instance, which is injury caused by pressure differences affecting gas-filled spaces in the body. We've discussed the obvious ones like lungs and ears and sinuses, but there are other gas-filled spaces you might not think about. Your digestive system, for instance. Your intestines contain gas produced by bacteria during digestion. Under increased pressure, this gas would compress. During ascent, it would expand. If you ascended too quickly, the expanding gas in your intestines could cause them to rupture, spilling their contents into your abdominal cavity, causing peritonitis, which is fatal without immediate surgery. Good luck getting surgery at 3,000 meters during a decompression stop. Or consider your teeth. If you have any fillings or dental work, there might be tiny pockets of trapped air between the filling and the tooth. Under pressure, these pockets compress. During ascent, they expand, and if they expand too much, they can crack your tooth or even cause it to explode. It's called parodontalgia, tooth squeeze, and while it's rarely fatal, it's incredibly painful and could cause you to panic during your ascent, potentially leading to mistakes that are fatal. Then there are the long-term effects of pressure on your nervous system. Recent research suggests that exposure to very high pressures, even with proper decompression, can cause subtle neurological damage. Divers who regularly work at great depths show cognitive decline faster than the general population, with issues like memory problems, reduced processing speed, and difficulty with complex tasks. The pressure seems to cause minor damage to neural tissue that accumulates over time, and while this is based on data from divers who made many deep dives over years, even a single dive to 5,000 meters might cause measurable cognitive damage. You'd survive, but you might not be quite the same person afterward, your brain subtly altered by the experience in ways that wouldn't be obvious until you tried to go back to your normal life and found that things weren't quite as easy as they used to be. Let's take a moment to discuss why anyone would even want to go to the deep sea in the first place, because at this point you might be wondering why humans bother exploring an environment that's so thoroughly committed to killing us. The answer is simple: because it's there, and because it's one of the last frontiers on Earth. We've mapped the surface of Mars in better detail than we've mapped the ocean floor. We know more about the far side of the moon than we know about the deepest trenches in our own oceans. The deep sea represents the largest habitat on Earth, and we've barely scratched the surface of understanding it. There are species down there we've never seen, geological processes we don't understand, chemical and biological resources that could be valuable. The deep sea might hold clues to how life began on Earth, since some scientists think that life might have originated around hydrothermal vents, where chemical energy was abundant and the environment was protected from the harsh conditions on early Earth's surface. Studying the deep sea could answer fundamental questions about biology, geology, and even astrobiology, since if life can exist in the deep sea's extreme conditions, maybe it could exist in similar conditions on other worlds, under the ice of Europa or Enceladus, in subsurface oceans on distant moons. So we explore, despite the danger, using submarines and remotely operated vehicles, and occasionally, rarely, sending humans down in specially designed pressure vessels. James Cameron, the director, descended to the bottom of the Mariana Trench in 2012, reaching a depth of almost 11,000 meters, the deepest point in Earth's oceans. He spent hours down there, alone in a tiny submarine, looking out at a landscape no human had seen in over 50 years, and he survived to tell the story. But he was in a submarine protected by layers of steel and sophisticated life support systems, with a support team on the surface and emergency protocols in place. He wasn't trying to survive in a pressure suit, wasn't exposed directly to the environment. Even with all those precautions, his submarine experienced equipment failures, hydraulic fluid leaks, and he had to cut his time at the bottom short and return to the surface earlier than planned. The deep sea almost got him anyway, despite all the engineering and all the safety measures, because the deep sea is just that hostile. Now let's talk about some real-world disasters that illustrate what happens when deep-sea exploration goes wrong, because these aren't hypothetical scenarios. People have died exploring the deep ocean, and their deaths were exactly as terrible as you'd imagine. In 1963, the submarine USS Thresher was conducting deep diving tests when it experienced a catastrophic failure and sank with all 129 crew members aboard. The submarine imploded at a depth of around 600 meters when it exceeded its crush depth. The implosion was so violent that it happened faster than human nerve impulses could travel, meaning the crew literally died before their brains could register what was happening. One moment they existed, the next moment they were gone, compressed into the wreckage of their submarine by hundreds of atmospheres of pressure in a fraction of a second. Subsequent investigations found pieces of the submarine scattered across the ocean floor, the metal torn and twisted, and no recoverable remains of the crew because there was nothing left to recover. The pressure had destroyed everything. Or consider the diving bell accident in the North Sea in 1983, where a group of saturation divers was working at a depth of around 90 meters. Saturation diving is a technique where divers live in a pressurized chamber on the surface and make excursions to depth in a diving bell, staying saturated with dissolved gases for days or weeks at a time, then slowly decompressing only once at the end of the job. During a routine bell transfer, a clamp failed, and the pressurized diving bell was suddenly exposed to surface pressure. The rapid decompression was explosive. 3 of the 4 divers in the bell died instantly, their bodies literally torn apart by the pressure differential. The 4th diver survived because he happened to be in a section of the bell that maintained some pressure, but he was permanently disabled by the decompression injuries. The autopsy reports are nightmare fuel, massive tissue damage, organs ruptured, gases expanding so violently inside the body that it caused catastrophic internal injuries. These men were experienced professional divers with years of training, using equipment designed specifically for deep sea work, supported by teams of engineers and medical personnel, and they still died in seconds when the pressure protection failed. What chance would you have in a hypothetical pressure suit, probably with less sophisticated life support, definitely with less support infrastructure, trying to survive at depths these divers never attempted? Let's discuss the economic and practical reasons why deep-sea exploration is so limited, because it's not just the danger that keeps humans from regularly visiting the abyss. It's the sheer cost and difficulty of doing so. A submarine capable of reaching 5,000 meters costs tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to design and build. The materials needed to withstand that pressure are exotic and expensive. Titanium alloys, specialized ceramics, ultra-thick glass for viewports. The life support systems are complex and require constant maintenance. Each dive costs additional money in terms of support vessels, crew, fuel, and equipment wear. For the price of a single deep-sea diving mission, you could launch a satellite, fund a year of cancer research, or build a school. The return on investment for deep-sea exploration is minimal from a purely economic standpoint. There are no cities to visit down there, no resources that can be easily extracted, no commercial applications that justify the expense. We explore the deep sea for scientific knowledge, for curiosity, for the human drive to see what's over the next hill, or in this case, under the next few thousand meters of water. But it's hard to justify spending billions of dollars on something that doesn't produce immediate tangible benefits, especially when that money could be spent on problems that affect humans more directly. This is why the deep sea remains largely unexplored despite the technology existing to explore it. We could build more submarines, could send more missions, could map the sea floor in detail and catalog all the species living there. We just don't, because the cost-benefit analysis doesn't work out, because humanity has decided collectively that there are more pressing priorities than satisfying curiosity about the abyss. So the deep sea remains mysterious, a vast frontier that we occasionally poke at with robots and submarines, but mostly ignore, leaving it to the creatures that evolve to live there, that don't need pressure suits or life support or millions of dollars worth of equipment, that just exist in that crushing darkness because it's their home and they're adapted to it in ways we never could be. The deep sea belongs to them, not to us. And maybe that's how it should be. Maybe some places aren't meant for humans. Maybe some frontiers should remain unexplored, not because we can't explore them, but because the cost in money, risk, and human life is too high to justify the knowledge gained. But let's say you're convinced that you need to go to the deep sea anyway. Maybe you're a scientist with a burning question that can only be answered by direct observation at depth. Maybe you're an explorer with a death wish and a trust fund. Maybe you're just curious and foolish in equal measure. You've read all of this, you understand the risks, and you still want to go. What would you actually need to survive, hypothetically speaking, if we ignore the limits of current technology and imagine a perfect pressure suit? First, the suit itself would need to maintain internal pressure at 1 atmosphere while withstanding 500 atmospheres external pressure. The material would need to be strong enough not to collapse, flexible enough to allow movement, and light enough to be transportable. Current technology can't really do all three simultaneously. We can build pressure vessels that are strong and maintain internal pressure, like submarine hulls, but they're rigid and heavy. We can build flexible suits for shallow water diving, but they can't handle deep pressure. A true deep-sea pressure suit would need to be something new, perhaps using powered exoskeleton technology to provide strength while maintaining flexibility, made from materials that haven't been invented yet. Second, your life support would need to be robust and redundant. You'd need multiple oxygen supplies, multiple CO2 scrubbers, multiple power sources, all of them capable of functioning under extreme pressure and cold. You'd need the ability to survive for days or weeks, not hours, to account for the decompression time required for safe ascent. This means carrying a lot of consumables, which means the suit would need to be larger and heavier, which means it would need more power to move, which means bigger batteries, which adds more weight in a vicious cycle. Third, you'd need navigation and communication systems that work at depth. Radio waves don't propagate through seawater well, so you'd need some kind of acoustic communication system, probably similar to what submarines use, with very low data rates and high latency. You'd need a way to track your position, your depth, your orientation in three-dimensional space. You'd need a way to find your way back to your descent point or to a recovery vehicle. Getting lost at 5,000 meters is fatal, so your navigation systems would need to be extremely reliable, again with redundancy built in. Fourth, you'd need protection from the cold. Your suit would need insulation, heating elements, probably some kind of thermal regulation system that could adapt to varying activity levels and external conditions. This requires power, always more power, and power means batteries, and batteries have limited capacity and limited lifespan, especially in the cold. Fifth, you'd need mobility. A pressure suit that kept you alive but rendered you immobile would be useless for exploration. You'd need powered limbs, thrusters, maybe some way to move through the water and across the seafloor. More systems, more potential failure points, more power consumption. Sixth, you'd need sensors and tools, lights to see by, cameras to record what you're seeing, sampling tools to collect specimens, scientific instruments to measure whatever you're trying to measure. All of these need to be rated for deep pressure. All of them need power. All of them need to be controlled through your suit's interface systems. Seventh, and perhaps most importantly, you'd need redundancy. Everything we've discussed so far needs to have backups, backups, and ideally backups. Your oxygen system fails. You have a secondary oxygen system. That fails. You have an emergency oxygen supply. Your power fails. You have backup batteries. Those fail. You have a tertiary power system, maybe fuel cells or radioisotope generators. Your heating fails. You have chemical heating packs, then an emergency thermal blanket. Then if all else fails, the knowledge that hypothermia will kill you in about 30 minutes, so you'd better solve the problem fast. Every system needs multiple failure modes before you die, because in the deep sea, a single point of failure means death. Your suit would need to be engineered to the highest standards possible, tested extensively, maintained obsessively, and even then, even with all those precautions, it would still be a fragile bubble of survivable conditions surrounded by an environment actively trying to kill you. The suit would be expensive, probably costing as much as a small submarine, and it would require a support team, supply vessels, extensive training, emergency protocols, and a lot of luck. And after all that, after solving all the engineering problems and spending all the money and training for months or years, you'd finally be ready to descend into the abyss. Let's imagine your descent in this hypothetical perfect suit. You step off the platform or the dive boat or whatever deployment system your support team has set up, and you start sinking. The water is blue-green, bright with sunlight, and for the first few minutes, everything seems almost pleasant. You can see the support vessel above you, its hull shrinking as you descend, and around you, schools of fish dart through the water, curious about this strange mechanical creature entering their domain. At 20 meters, the light is still good, but starting to dim slightly. Your suit systems are all reading normal. Temperature is stable. Pressure inside the suit is 1 atmosphere, while outside it's 3 atmospheres. Oxygen levels are good. CO2 is being scrubbed effectively. You're descending at a controlled rate. maybe 10 meters per minute, and you start to relax slightly. Maybe this won't be so bad. Maybe all those warnings about the deep sea being deadly were exaggerated. At 50 meters, the light is noticeably dimmer, the blue-green fading toward darker shades. You turn on your suit lights, powerful LEDs that illuminate the water around you, and the fish have mostly disappeared. You're past the depth where casual divers venture. You're entering the realm of technical diving, except you're not stopping at 50 meters. You're not even slowing down. You check your instruments. Depth 50 meters. Internal pressure 1 atmosphere, external pressure 6 atmospheres. The differential is already significant, 5 atmospheres trying to compress your suit, but the materials are holding firm. No leaks, no alarms, everything functioning as designed. You continue your descent. At 100 meters, you're in the twilight zone. The light from above is faint, more of a memory than an illumination, and your suit lights are essential now. You're surrounded by darkness, punctuated by occasional flashes of bioluminescence, tiny organisms sparking like underwater stars as they react to your presence. It's beautiful in a way that's also deeply unsettling, because you're very aware that you're in an alien environment now, a place where humans don't belong. The pressure differential is now 10 atmospheres, and you can feel it in the slight resistance of your suit's joints, the servos working a bit harder to move your limbs against the increasing pressure. At 200 meters, you cross from the twilight zone into the midnight zone, and the darkness becomes absolute. Your lights are the only illumination, 2 beams of harsh white light cutting through black water, revealing particles of organic detritus drifting slowly downward like snow. This is marine snow, the constant rain of dead organisms and fecal matter and other organic material falling from the surface waters above the food source for much of the deep sea ecosystem. You're descending through a snowstorm of death and decay, and it's oddly hypnotic, countless particles drifting past your faceplate and your light's beams. 500 meters, 1,000. The darkness is complete and unchanging. Your lights reveal nothing but water and marine snow, occasionally something bigger drifting past, a jellyfish perhaps, or a piece of debris. The pressure differential is now 101 atmospheres. Your suit is handling it. The internal pressure is still stable at 1 atmosphere, but you can hear creaks and groans from the material, the sound of structure under stress. Your support team radios you, their voices distorted by the acoustic communication system, asking for a status report. You respond that all systems are nominal, which is true, but you don't mention the creaking, don't mention the slight anxiety building in your chest, don't mention that every instinct you have is screaming at you to abort this dive and return to the surface. 1,500 meters, 2,000, you're deeper than any human has ever gone in a pressure suit, deeper than should be possible, but your suit is holding. The joints are getting stiffer, the servos working harder, drawing more power from your batteries. You make a note that if you have to do any heavy work at depth, the power consumption could become a problem. 2,500 meters, 3,000. The marine snow has decreased, less organic material making it this far down, and you're occasionally seeing creatures now. A gulper eel swims past, its enormous jaws agape, and you watch it disappear into the darkness beyond your lights. An anglerfish, surprisingly small, illuminates itself with bioluminescence and is gone. You're in their world now, an intruder watched by eyes adapted to darkness and minimal light. 3,500 meters, 4,000. Your descent has taken hours now, and you're starting to feel the mental strain. The darkness, the isolation, the constant awareness of the pressure outside your suit, all of it weighing on you psychologically. You run through mental exercises, counting backwards, reciting poetry, anything to keep your mind engaged and prevent it from spiraling into panic. 4,500 meters, you're approaching your target depth, and suddenly your lights catch something unexpected. It's a whale fall, a dead whale that sank to the seafloor, and it's covered with life. Scavengers are everywhere, hagfish burrowing into the carcass, giant isopods crawling across the bones, bacterial mats covering every surface, tube worms growing from the skeleton itself. A whale fall is an oasis in the deep sea, providing food and habitat for years or even decades as the whale's body slowly decays and is consumed. It's fascinating and grotesque in equal measure. A festival of death and decay, nature recycling biomass in the most efficient way possible. You watch for several minutes, your suit's cameras recording everything, until you remember that you're here for a purpose and you should probably continue to your target depth, 5,000 meters. You've arrived. The pressure outside your suit is 500 atmospheres, 7,350 pounds per square inch, and your suit is somehow still maintaining 1 atmosphere inside. You've done it. You've achieved what should be impossible. You're standing, or rather floating, in the abyssal zone, and you're alive. The sea floor is below you, a plain of soft sediment stretching away into the darkness beyond your lights. You descend the last few meters and touch down gently, your suit's feet sinking slightly into the mud. You've made it to the bottom of the world, and for this moment, everything is peaceful. The water is clear down here, no marine snow, no suspended particles, just empty water pressing in from all sides. You can see perhaps 50 meters in your light's beam before the darkness swallows the light, and in that bubble of illumination, you observe the abyss. The seafloor is mostly empty, just mud and occasional rocks, but there's life here. Sea cucumbers, those bizarre tube-like echinoderms, are everywhere, slowly crawling across the bottom, feeding on organic material in the sediment. An occasional fish darts past, species you don't recognize, adapted to this environment in ways you can only guess at. In the distance, you see a faint glow, perhaps a hydrothermal vent or a colony of bioluminescent organisms, and you make a mental note to investigate if your air and power allow. You've survived the descent. You're in the deep sea, the place you've read about, dreamed about, and planned for. And for this moment, protected by your miracle suit, you're actually doing it. You spend the next several hours exploring the area around your landing site, moving slowly and carefully, always aware that any mistake could be fatal. Your suit's servos are working hard to move your limbs against the pressure, and you can hear the faint whir of electric motors with every movement. The power gauge shows you're drawing more current than predicted, and you make a note that you'll need to return to the surface sooner than planned unless you want to risk running out of battery during your decompression stops. You collect samples of sediment, of the strange creatures you find, carefully sealing them in pressure-resistant containers. You take photographs and video documenting everything you see, because even if you survive this experience, it's unlikely anyone will ever come back to this exact spot. The deep sea is too vast, the coordinates too difficult to return to with precision, and the expense too great to justify repeated visits to the same location. You discover a hydrothermal vent field, the seafloor cracked and emitting clouds of superheated water. The water coming out of the vents is hot enough to melt lead, but it cools rapidly as it mixes with the surrounding seawater, creating a cloud of minerals and chemicals. Around the vents, life thrives in impossible abundance. Tube worms cluster near the vents, some of them several meters long, their red plumes waving in the current. Vent crabs scuttle across the rocks, feeding on bacteria. Clouds of shrimp, white and ghostly in your lights, hover around the vent openings, farming bacteria on their bodies. This is a chemosynthetic ecosystem based not on photosynthesis but on chemical energy from the Earth's interior, and it's thriving here in the dark where no sunlight has ever reached. You're fascinated, documenting everything, taking samples, making observations, and the hours slip by without you noticing. This is why you came here, why you risked everything to descend into the abyss. This is knowledge that couldn't be gained any other way, observations that no robot could make with the same insight and flexibility that a human observer can provide. You're doing science at the edge of human capability, and for these hours, the risk feels worth it. But eventually, reality reasserts itself. Your power gauge is showing yellow, warning that your batteries are at 50% capacity. Your oxygen is still good. You have plenty for the long ascent, but power is becoming a concern. You need to start your ascent soon or risk running out of battery power during decompression stops, which would be very bad. You take one last look around the vent field, committing the scene to memory, knowing you'll probably never see anything like this again, and then you activate your ascent program. Your suit's buoyancy control engages, and you start to rise slowly from the seafloor. The sediment you disturbed during your exploration swirls in the current from your ascent, and the vent field disappears below you into the darkness. You're leaving the abyss, beginning the long journey back to the surface, and if you thought the descent was stressful, the ascent is worse because now you have hours or days ahead of you with nothing to do but wait at decompression stops while your body slowly releases the gases dissolved in your tissues. The ascent from 5,000 meters is controlled by your suit's computer, programmed with the optimal decompression schedule based on your depth, time at depth, and the gas mixture you've been breathing. Every 100 meters, you stop and hover at that depth for a calculated period of time, allowing nitrogen and helium to off-gas from your tissues into your bloodstream and then out through your lungs. At 4,900 meters, you stop for 3 hours. There's nothing to do but float in the darkness, conserving power, breathing slowly, trying not to think about how much can still go wrong. Your suit's sensors are monitoring your physiological status, watching for signs of decompression, sickness, but you know that some symptoms might not appear until you're much closer to the surface or even after you've surfaced. You run through mental checklists, verifying that all systems are still functioning. Power is at 45% now, still good, but dropping faster than you'd like. Oxygen is fine. Temperature control is working, keeping you at a comfortable temperature despite the near-freezing water outside. Communications are intermittent, the acoustic system struggling with the distance to the surface ship, but you can still send status. Reports every hour. At 4,800 meters, you stop again, this time for 4 hours. The decompression stops are getting longer as you get closer to the surface because the pressure differential is getting larger. The rate of off-gassing needs to be slower to prevent bubbles from forming. You're starting to feel the tedium the endless waiting in the darkness with nothing but your thoughts for company. You try to sleep, but sleeping in a pressure suit while hovering in deep water is nearly impossible. You're too aware of where you are, too aware of the danger, too uncomfortable in the suit's confines. At 4,500 meters, you stop for 6 hours, and this is where things start to go wrong. Not catastrophically wrong, not yet, but wrong enough to spike your adrenaline and make you acutely aware of how precarious your situation is. Your suit's power gauge drops suddenly from 40% to 35%, a larger drop than the consumption rate would predict. You run diagnostics, trying to figure out what's happening, and discover that one of your battery packs is failing. The cold, the pressure, the stress of hours of operation, something has caused a failure in the battery chemistry, and it's no longer providing power effectively. You're down to 2 battery packs out of 3, and while that's still within the safety margin, it's closer than you'd like. You radio the surface, report the battery failure, and they run their own calculations, confirming what you already know. You should still have enough power to complete the ascent and decompression, but there's no room for errors now. Any additional power consumption, any unexpected delays, and you could be in serious trouble. You adjust your plan, turning off non-essential systems to conserve power. Your external lights go off except for a single low-power marker light. Your cameras stop recording. The heating system drops to minimum setting, and you immediately feel the cold creeping in, stealing your body heat slowly but inexorably. You're shivering now, burning calories to generate heat, and shivering increases your oxygen consumption, which means your air might run low before the power does, which means you need to stay calm and control your breathing and stop shivering, which is impossible when you're cold, which creates a feedback loop of stress and discomfort. The 6 hours at 4,500 meters feel like 6 days. You're cold, uncomfortable, worried about your power situation, isolated in the darkness, and there's nothing you can do but wait for your body to off-gas so you can continue ascending. You try to meditate to calm your mind, but every few minutes you're checking your instruments, watching the power gauge, counting down the minutes until you can move to the next decompression stop. When the 6 hours finally end and your suit's computer gives you permission to ascend to the next stop, you almost cry with relief. Movement, progress, getting closer to the surface even if it's only 100 meters closer. At 4,000 meters, you stop for 8 hours, and your power is at 30%. The math is starting to look bad. You have another 50 stops to make, and while the early stops are short, the later stops near the surface will be hours or even days long. You run the calculations again and again, hoping for a different answer, but the numbers don't lie. You're probably going to run out of power before you complete decompression. Not definitely, not yet, but probably. You radio the surface, explain the situation, and they go silent for several minutes while they consult with engineers and dive medical experts. When they come back, their message is not reassuring. You need to extend your decompression stops and reduce your power consumption even further. If you run out of power during ascent, you'll lose life support, heating, communications, everything. If that happens while you're still deep, you'll die from hypothermia or suffocation long before you could surface. They're sending down a remotely operated vehicle with a backup battery pack, but it will take hours to reach your depth, and you need to conserve every watt of power until it arrives. You turn off your marker light, plunging yourself into absolute darkness. You drop the heating system to 0, accepting that you're going to get dangerously cold in order to preserve power for life support. You reduce your communications to text-only messages sent once per hour because the acoustic modem uses less power than voice transmission. You're now floating in complete darkness, cold seeping into your bones despite your best efforts to generate body heat, utterly alone in a way that few humans have ever experienced. The ROV reaches you after 6 hours, appearing out of the darkness like a mechanical angel, its lights almost painful after hours of total darkness. The ROV crew navigates it carefully to your suit, and you use your nearly frozen fingers to disconnect your failing battery pack and connect the new one. Power surges back to full capacity, and you allow yourself a moment of relief before realizing that this was just one crisis averted. You still have hours or days of decompression ahead of you, and any number of other things could go wrong. The ROV stays with you for the next several decompression, stops a companion in the darkness, its lights providing some small comfort. Eventually, at 3,000 meters, it has to return to the surface to recharge its own batteries, leaving you alone again, but at least you have power now. You have heat, you have light if you need it, you have a better chance of surviving this ascent. At 2,000 meters, you begin to see faint light from above for the first time in days. It's not much, just a slight lessening of the absolute darkness, a suggestion of blue-green in the black, but it's enough to lift your spirits slightly. You're getting closer to the surface, closer to safety, closer to an environment where humans can survive without technological assistance. But you're also getting closer to the most dangerous part of the decompression schedule, because the pressure differential between the stops is getting larger, and the time required at each stop is getting longer. At 1,000 meters, you stop for 12 hours, and at this point, you're no longer in the midnight zone. You're back in the twilight zone, where faint light penetrates, and you can actually see the water around you without your suit lights. It's a murky blue-green, with particles of marine snow drifting past, and you can occasionally see fish in the distance, small silvery shapes darting through the water. It feels almost normal, almost like the shallow ocean that humans are familiar with, except you're still at 101 atmospheres of pressure and you still can't surface without dying. The 12 hours pass slowly, but less painfully than the stops in deeper water. You can see your surroundings, which helps with the psychological stress. You can see the surface ship far above you, a dark shape silhouetted against the brighter water near the surface. And knowing that it's there, that humans in safety are just 1,000 meters away, makes the waiting more bearable. At 500 meters, you stop for 18 hours, and this is the longest decompression stop yet. You're now in the zone where recreational scuba divers sometimes venture, at least the technical divers with advanced training, and the water is bright enough that you don't need lights. You can see the surface from here, a shimmering boundary between water and air 100 meters above you, tantalizingly close, but still inaccessible. You have to wait, have to let your body slowly release the massive amounts of dissolved gas in your tissues, have to trust that the decompression calculations are correct and that you won't develop the bends, even though you've spent more time at extreme pressure than any human in history. The 18 hours are torture, not because of any physical discomfort, but because you're so close to the surface, so close to being able to get out of this suit and breathe real air and feel real sunlight, and you can't. Not yet. You have to wait. At 200 meters, You stop for 24 hours, a full day hovering in the water column, and at this point, the physical discomfort of being in the suit for so long is becoming unbearable. You've been in this suit for days now, maybe a week, depending on how long you spent at depth before beginning your ascent. You've been urinating into a catheter and defecating into a diaper and eating nutrient paste through a feeding tube and drinking recycled urine and breathing recycled air. And every part of your body hurts from being in the same position for so long. Your muscles are stiff, your joints ache, you have pressure sores from the suit's hard contact points, and you smell terrible. A mixture of sweat and waste and fear that's been building up for days in the suit's confined atmosphere. You want out. You want out so badly that you have to actively fight the urge to just surface right now, to say, screw the decompression schedule and get out of this suit, even if it kills you, because at least it would be quick instead of this endless torture of waiting, but you don't. You're too close to survival to give up now, so you endure 24 hours, asterisk, asterisk, chapter 43, asterisk, asterisk, continue at 200 meters, breathing slowly, trying to sleep, trying not to think about how much longer this is going to take. The surface ship sends down supplies, more nutrient paste and water, delivered by the ROV, and you consume them mechanically without tasting them because they all taste like nothing anyway, and you're only eating to stay alive long enough to complete this ascent. You're experiencing what deep-sea divers call the rapture's opposite. Not the euphoria of nitrogen narcosis, but a crushing depression born from endless isolation and discomfort, and the knowledge that you still have days of this ahead of you. You talk to the support team more frequently now that you're close enough for clear communications, and they try to keep your spirits up, but you can hear the worry in their voices. They're concerned about your mental state, concerned that you might do something impulsive, and honestly, so are you. You've never been this exhausted, this uncomfortable, this desperate for the ordeal to end, and you understand now why deep-sea diving has such a high attrition rate, why many divers do it once or twice and then quit forever. It's not the danger that breaks people, though the danger is real. It's the sheer misery of the decompression, the endless hours of discomfort with nothing to do but wait and hurt and smell your own filth. At 100 meters, you stop for 36 hours, and the water here is bright and warm compared to the abyss. You can see the surface clearly, can see waves in the hull of the support ship, can see sunlight streaming through the water in golden rays. You're so close, so impossibly close, but you have to wait another day and a half floating in this beautiful blue water, watching fish swim past, watching the world of the surface go on without you just 100 meters away. The 36 hours are the longest of your life. Every minute feels like an hour, every hour like a day. You sleep when you can, but sleep is fitful and broken, interrupted by discomfort and anxiety, and the sheer wrongness of sleeping while hanging in the water column. You wake repeatedly, disoriented, not sure if minutes or hours have passed, checking your decompression timer and finding that it's barely advanced at all. Finally, mercifully, the decompression timer reaches 0 and your suit's computer clears you for final ascent to the surface. You activate your buoyancy control one last time and rise through the last 100 meters of water, slowly, carefully, not rushing, even though every fiber of your being wants to rocket to the surface and get out of this suit immediately. At 50 meters, You pause briefly, a final safety stop, making absolutely sure that your tissues have released all their dissolved gases. At 20 meters, you can hear the support ship's engines, can hear voices calling down to you through the water. At 10 meters, you can see people on the ship's deck, can see the recovery equipment being prepared. At 5 meters, you see divers entering the water to assist you, and you've never been so happy to see other human beings in your life. You break the surface, and the sunlight hits your faceplate, warm and bright and glorious after days in the darkness. The support divers attach lines to your suit, guiding you to the recovery platform, and you're lifted out of the water by crane, your suit dripping, your body so weak from days of immobility that you can't support your own weight. They lay you on the deck and begin the process of removing your suit, carefully, methodically, checking your vital signs constantly. When they finally remove your helmet, you breathe real air for the first time in days, and it's the sweetest thing you've ever tasted. Not recycled, not processed, not filtered through scrubbers and exchangers, just plain atmospheric air with all its imperfections and impurities, and it's perfect. They help you out of the suit, and you can't walk your legs like rubber after days without use. They carry you to the medical bay, and doctors swarm over you, checking for signs of decompression sickness, taking blood samples, running tests, asking questions about your symptoms. You're dehydrated despite drinking water throughout the ascent. You're hypothermic despite the suit's heating systems. You're malnourished despite eating nutrient paste. You're covered in pressure sores and rashes, and your muscles are atrophied, and your joints are inflamed, and you smell like a crime scene in a landfill, but you're alive. You survived. Against all odds, against all reasonable expectations, you descended to 5,000 meters and came back. You've done something that should be impossible, that might actually be impossible, and you just got incredibly lucky. And as they wheel you toward the hyperbaric chamber for monitoring in case of delayed decompression sickness symptoms, you're laughing and crying simultaneously, your brain unable to process the flood of emotions. The next 72 hours are spent in the hyperbaric chamber, a precautionary measure to treat any decompression sickness symptoms that might appear. You share the chamber with a medical attendant who monitors you constantly, checking your reflexes, your cognitive function, your joint pain levels. You develop some symptoms, mild joint pain in your shoulders and knees, some skin mottling, slight dizziness. These are treated with oxygen therapy and additional pressurization cycles, and they gradually resolve over the course of 3 days. During this time, you eat real food, not nutrient paste, but actual solid food, and it's a revelation. A simple sandwich tastes like the greatest meal ever prepared. You shower multiple times, scrubbing away days of accumulated filth, and even the industrial soap provided by the ship smells like perfume compared to your own stench. You sleep in a real bed, horizontal for the first time in days, and despite the chamber's confined space and clinical atmosphere, it's the most comfortable you've been since this expedition began. You're debriefed by the mission scientists, downloading all the data from your suit's sensors and storage, reviewing your photographs and video. The footage of the hydrothermal vent field is spectacular, unique, worth the risk, according to the scientists who watch it with barely contained excitement. You've documented behaviors and species interactions that have never been recorded before, collected samples that might yield new insights into extremophile biology and the origins of life. From a scientific standpoint, your dive was a complete success. From a personal standpoint, you're beginning to process the trauma of what you just experienced. The psychologist assigned to the expedition visits you in the chamber, asking careful questions about your mental state, your stress levels, whether you're experiencing any intrusive thoughts or flashbacks. You are, of course. You keep seeing the darkness, keep feeling the cold, keep experiencing moments of panic when you remember being at 4,000 meters with failing batteries and no guarantee of survival. The psychologist assures you that this is normal, that anyone who went through what you just went through would experience similar symptoms, and that with time and proper support, you'll recover. You're not entirely sure you believe them. When you're finally cleared to leave the hyperbaric chamber, you emerge into bright sunlight on the ship's deck, and the world feels different somehow. Colors seem more vivid, sounds more clear, sensations emery intense. You're experiencing what psychologists call heightened perception following trauma, a state where your nervous system is still on high alert, processing sensory information with unusual intensity. It will fade with time, but for now, everything feels almost overwhelming in its richness and detail. The ship begins its journey back to port, and you spend the days of transit recovering physically and trying to process what happened emotionally. Your body is healing. The pressure sores are scabbing over. Your muscles are regaining strength through physical therapy exercises. Your joints are becoming less inflamed, but your mind is struggling with the memory of the abyss, with the darkness and pressure and fear, with the knowledge of how close you came to dying multiple times during the expedition. You have nightmares, vivid and terrifying, where you're back in the suit and something is going wrong and you can't fix it, and you're sinking deeper into darkness while water pours in through widening cracks. You wake up gasping, disoriented, needing several minutes to convince yourself that you're safe, that you're on a ship, that you're not drowning at the bottom of the ocean. The other expedition members try to be supportive, but there's a distance between you and them now, because you went somewhere they didn't experience something they can't fully understand. Even the most experienced deep-sea scientists on the ship have never been to 5,000 meters in a pressure suit. They've been to depth in submarines, safely enclosed in metal hulls, but that's different from what you experienced. You were closer to the environment, more vulnerable, more aware of the thin boundary between life and death. You're changed by the experience in ways that won't be fully apparent for months or years. You've seen things that few humans have seen, been places that few humans have been, and you've survived an ordeal that would have killed most people. Whether this makes you stronger or more damaged is something you'll be figuring out for the rest of your life. When the ship finally reaches port, you're met by a media circus. News of your dive has spread, and suddenly you're being hailed as an explorer, a pioneer, a hero of science. Reporters want interviews, documentary filmmakers want your story, sponsors want to associate their brands with your achievement. It's overwhelming and uncomfortable because you don't feel like a hero. You feel like someone who barely survived a catastrophically dangerous experience, and you're not sure why you thought it was a good idea in the first place. But you do the interviews, you tell the story, you watch as your footage from the abyss is broadcast to millions of people who will never understand what it was really like. They see the beauty, the alien creatures, the stunning hydrothermal vents, but they don't feel the cold or the fear or the endless hours of decompression. They don't experience the claustrophobia or the discomfort or the very real possibility of death that accompanied every moment of your dive. The scientific community is more understanding. The researchers who debrief you, who analyze your data and samples, they understand the risks you took and the hardships you endured. Your findings are significant enough to warrant publication in major journals, and you're invited to present your research at conferences and symposiums around the world. This is gratifying in a way that the media attention isn't, because these are people who understand the value of what you discovered and the price you paid to discover it. But even among scientists, there's debate about whether what you did was justified. Some argue that you've proven humans can reach extreme depths in pressure suits, opening up new possibilities for deep-sea exploration and research. Others argue that you got lucky, that the risks were too high, that the same research could have been done with remotely operated vehicles at a fraction of the risk and cost. They're probably right, the critics. From a purely rational standpoint, sending humans to 5,000 meters in pressure suits doesn't make sense. It's too dangerous, too expensive, too likely to result in deaths that would set back deep-sea research for years or decades. But exploration has never been purely rational. Humans have always pushed into hostile environments, have always wanted to see for themselves, rather than through the eyes of robots, have always been willing to risk death for the sake of knowledge or achievement, or just because something hasn't been done before. 6 months after your dive, you're still dealing with the aftermath. Physically, you've mostly recovered. Your body has healed. Your muscles have regained their strength. The pressure sores have faded to faint scars. But there are lingering effects. Joint pain in cold weather, a persistent sensitivity to pressure changes that gives you headaches before storms, occasional numbness in your fingers from what might be minor nerve damage from the cold. These are small prices to pay for survival, but they're permanent reminders of what you experienced. Psychologically, the recovery is slower. You're in therapy, working through the trauma, learning coping mechanisms for the anxiety and the nightmares. They're getting better, less frequent, and less intense, but they haven't stopped entirely. You still have moments where you're suddenly back in the suit, feeling the cold and the pressure and the fear, and you have to ground yourself in the present, remind yourself that you're safe, that you survived. You've been offered opportunities to dive again, to use the refined version of the pressure suit that engineers have developed based on lessons learned from your expedition. You've declined every offer. Once was enough, more than enough. You proved it could be done, survived to tell the story, and you have no desire to tempt fate a second time. The abyss had its chance to kill you and failed, and you're not giving it another opportunity. But you think about the deep sea constantly, in your dreams, yes, but also during the day, random moments where you remember the beauty of the hydrothermal vents, or the strangeness of the creatures you encountered, or the profound silence of the darkness between your decompression stops. It was the most terrible experience of your life, but it was also the most intense, the most real, the most alive you've ever felt. Every sensation was heightened, every moment mattered, every decision could mean life or death. Normal life, in comparison, feels somewhat muted and mundane. This is common among people who survive extreme experiences. Combat veterans describe similar feelings, as do survivors of natural disasters or near-death experiences. The intensity of trauma becomes a kind of addiction, where normal life feels boring in comparison, and there's a perverse desire to return to the dangerous situation despite knowing how terrible it was. You're aware of this tendency in yourself, and you fight against it choosing safety over intensity, survival over experience. A year after your dive, there's a symposium dedicated to deep sea exploration, and you're invited as the keynote speaker. You accept partly because you've become an advocate for deep sea research funding, partly because you want to set the record straight about what deep sea exploration really entails. Too many people have romanticized your dive, turned it into an adventure story, a tale of triumph over adversity. You want to make clear that it was terrifying and miserable and nearly fatal, that the deep sea isn't a place for tourism or casual exploration, that every human visit to the abyss should be undertaken with full understanding of the risks and the costs. You stand on stage in front of hundreds of scientists, engineers, and policymakers, and you tell them the truth. You describe the cold and the fear and the endless decompression. You show them the footage, yes, but you also show them your medical reports, the documentation of your injuries and trauma and the long recovery process. You explain the engineering challenges, the multiple failures and near disasters, the sheer luck that allowed you to survive when by all rights you should have died. And then you make your argument. The deep sea should be explored, must be explored, because it represents the largest unknown habitat on our planet, and because the knowledge to be gained is invaluable. But it should be explored primarily with robots and remotely operated vehicles, with submarines for the depths they can safely reach, and with human divers only when absolutely necessary and with every possible safety measure in place. Human life is too valuable, the risks too high, to send people into the abyss casually or frequently. Your dive proved it could be done, but it also proved that it probably shouldn't be done, not with current technology, not at 5,000 meters. The audience receives your talk with a standing ovation, and afterward, dozens of people want to talk to you, to thank you for your honesty, to discuss the future of deep sea research. Several funding agencies approach you about supporting remotely operated vehicle programs, about developing better technology for exploring the abyss without risking human lives. This feels like a win, like maybe your experience will lead to better, safer approaches to deep sea exploration. 2 years after your dive, you've found a kind of peace with what happened. The nightmares are rare now, the anxiety manageable, the physical symptoms minor. You've written a book about the experience, a detailed account that doesn't shy away from the terror and discomfort, and it's become a bestseller, introducing millions of people to the realities of deep sea exploration. You've used the platform and the money from the book to advocate for ocean research funding, for better technology, for conservation of deep sea habitats that are increasingly threatened by mining and pollution. You give lectures at universities, consult with engineering firms developing new underwater vehicles, and serve on advisory boards for oceanographic institutions. You've turned your traumatic experience into something positive, something that might benefit future research and conservation efforts, and you've made peace with the fact that you'll never go back to the deep sea. Some people are disappointed by this, think you should lead more expeditions, push the boundaries further, go deeper, or stay longer. But you've learned that there's no shame in knowing your limits, in recognizing when you've pushed far enough. You went to 5,000 meters, to the abyssal zone, to a place where humans have no business being, and you survived to tell the story. That's enough, more than enough. Sometimes, late at night, you still think about the darkness and the cold, about the feeling of being utterly alone in the most hostile environment on Earth. You think about the creatures you saw, the sights you witnessed, the knowledge you gained, and sometimes, just sometimes, you feel a pull, a desire to return, to experience that intensity again. But then you remember the fear and the pain and the certainty that you were going to die, and the desire fades. The deep sea is still there, still dark and cold and crushing, still full of wonders and horrors in equal measure. It doesn't need you to visit it. It exists perfectly well without humans, has existed for billions of years before humans evolved, and will exist long after we're gone. You had your moment in the abyss, your brief intrusion into a world that isn't ours, and you survived. That's your story, your triumph, your trauma, and it's enough. The deep sea taught you something important, that there are places humans aren't meant to go, environments so hostile that our survival in them is a temporary miracle rather than a sustainable condition. Respect for these limits isn't cowardice, it's wisdom. The ocean doesn't care about human ambition or curiosity. It simply is vast and deep and utterly indifferent. And that's exactly how it should be. You wouldn't last a day in the deep sea. Not really. Not without technology and luck and support and favorable conditions, all aligning perfectly. And even then, you'd barely survive, emerging damaged and traumatized, forever changed by the experience. The deep sea isn't for humans, will never be for humans, and perhaps that's the most important lesson of all. Some mysteries are better observed from a distance, through cameras and sensors, rather than experienced firsthand. The abyss keeps its secrets, and maybe, just maybe, that's exactly as it should be.